Going viral can make you a superstar overnight, but what you do with that fame determines whether it becomes the beginning of your success or the reason for your doom. For Salt Bae, a 10-second clip changed everything. 1 minute, he's the internet's luxury chef, sprinkling salt for A-listers like Leonardo DiCaprio and David Beckham. Next, he's slashing prices at failing restaurant locations, getting kicked out of Champions League after party, and being dragged for filth by the same internet that once worshipped him. It's wild to think that a man who turned the sprinkle into a multi-million-dollar brand could fumble it all so badly, but that's exactly what's happening. And Salt Bae's downfall is only getting worse. But to understand how we got here, you need to know where it all started. Before the memes, the gold stakes, and the cringe moments, Salt Bae was just Nusret Gökçe, a school dropout focused on developing his butchery skills. For a long time, nobody knew his name or even cared about him. He was just a regular guy whose passion had him traveling to gain culinary experience. Eventually, Nusret launched his own steakhouse in Istanbul, and his career began growing. He started filming himself at work, slicing meat for a tiny online audience. But in 2017, Nusret posted one clip, just 10 seconds long, of him flicking his wrist and sprinkling salt like a showman. He didn't know it just yet, but that sprinkle stunt would make him an internet sensation. At first, the sprinkle turned Nusret into Salt Bae, the must-visit chef for celebrities and billionaires. His Istanbul steakhouse became a hotspot for public figures where the rich and wannabe rich assembled for a taste of the viral magic. He expanded fast, with new locations popping up in Dubai, Miami, London, LA, and New York. And every one of his restaurants sold virtually the same thing: overpriced steak wrapped in gold leaf, and the chance to say you've eaten at the famous Salt Bae Steakhouse. Salt Bae became a living tourist attraction, and eventually, people weren't just paying for steak. They were willingly paying outrageous amounts for an experience, watching him sprinkle salt on their $1,000 gold-coated steak. And for a while, it worked. But when you build an empire on spectacles alone, it only takes one tasteless stunt to make people rethink everything. Like in 2018, when Venezuelan's President Nicolas Maduro showed up for a private meal at Salt Bae's restaurant, happily getting served expensive steaks during a time of great famine in his country. And of course, that came with a lot of backlash, but at least most of the outrage was aimed at President Maduro. Food tastes so much better when you know folks back home are starving. As a Venezuelan, it angers me seeing my president feasting on a meal while me and my family were starving. Shame on him. This controversy made people see Salt Bae and his restaurant in a bad light. To them, he was someone who cared more about money and fame as opposed to morals. But the thing about always chasing the spotlight is that sooner or later it churns on you. Fast forward to December 18th, 2022, at the FIFA World Cup final in Qatar. Moments after Argentina's victory, Salt Bae somehow snuck his way onto the pitch. While that was wrong in itself, what he did next made it even worse. Because while the world was celebrating one of football's greatest moments, Salt Bae was focused on something else entirely. And from the look of things, how to make himself the star of the show. In a moment that made millions cringe, he shoved his way into the player spot, dragging Messi for a selfie, and even putting a player's medal in his mouth. But what angered people even more wasn't just him trying to perform his salt sprinkling magic, but how he tried to snatch the World Cup trophy and even kissed it, a privilege which is strictly reserved for the winning team. Everyone was confused and uncomfortable. Even Messi's body language made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with the spectacle. After the footage went viral, football fans and the media slammed Salt Bae for disrespecting the rules and trying to overshadow Argentina's victory. Not only that, he was grabbing it out of players' hands, not even asking politely to hold it. Definition of cringe, I couldn't even watch it. Biting that dude's medal. A small part of me would almost respect the audacity if it wasn't painfully cringe. He had absolutely no right to be there. Hope he, and whoever he paid to get there, are punished.
Nusret is not in any way related to any of these Argentina players. It struck a wrong chord. It struck to me as like kind of this sort of ceaseless self-promotion of this guy. And look, you're a successful businessman. What you do works, but like, this is their moment. It's not yours.
And when Salt Bae was later asked why he did it, he simply claimed he was excited and that he didn't know he was not supposed to touch the trophy, which of course didn't make things better. I didn't go on pitch with the person purpose of advertising, I just felt like it. Then it was a bit of a surprise. I never ever wanted to overshadow anything. I didn't like the attention. Well, we all know how true that is. That single moment not only made people cringe, but it also crossed a line that forced FIFA to step in.
Football's governing body, FIFA, has opened an investigation into a security and protocol breach at the end of the World Cup final in Qatar. This after celebrity chef Salt Bae was filmed harassing players from the victorious Argentine team, including Lionel Messi.
Yep, the situation was so intense that FIFA had to launch a full-on investigation into how he even got onto the pitch in the first place. Then, they proceeded to ban him from all future FIFA events to prevent this from happening at any level of football. You would think that kind of global embarrassment would make Salt Bae tone things down, at least when it comes to such a mainstream sport. But Salt Bae would again prove that his thirst for clout was greater than any amount of shame he could be forced to endure. Because just recently, he tried to pull off another headline-grabbing stunt, and this time, it backfired even harder. During the Champions League after-party, which is typically for players who've battled it out in the intense tournament, Salt Bae showed up uninvited in an attempt to sprinkle his way back into the spotlight one more time. But unfortunately for him, things wouldn't go his way this time. Instead of slipping in unnoticed, he got caught red-handed and was publicly humiliated and kicked out by the security like any other party crasher. Of course, Salt Bae tried to save face. He claimed that he was there to return the love and sign autographs for fans, and that he was totally unaware it was an exclusive event. Again, playing the ignorance card.
I just wanted to make it very clear that this is some absolute clown behavior. I never think it's a good idea to try and make one thing your entire identity. Whether it's a meme, whether it's you just being a fan of something, I always think that that's always just going to be a path to cringe. Just imagine getting a huge ego because you sprinkle salt down your arm on overpriced steak.
But here's the thing. Salt Bae didn't just wake up one day and decide to crash football events for fun. A lot of things behind the scenes had most likely pushed him to these desperate stunts. And when you peek behind the curtains of his steak empire, it all starts to make sense why he was clout chasing this hard. Because the truth is, Salt Bae's shiny image wasn't as golden as it looked on Instagram. The illusion of perfection began to shatter when his own staff started spilling what it was really like working for Salt Bae. Reports began to surface of his workers complaining about the exhausting work culture where they were overlooked, underpaid, and treated unfairly. One non-Turkish manager claimed that he was constantly sidelined and mistreated. And when he finally dared to speak up about the discrimination, he didn't just get ignored, he was swiftly demoted. This was a clear, serious act of favoritism, and according to reports, Salt Bae was heavily discriminatory. However, it didn't stop there. Female staff told even darker stories. One said she was forced to wear club outfits instead of the proper uniform for waitresses. When another reported being sexually harassed by a customer, she was brushed off and told to play along. Some employees even went as far as calling him a dictator with a god complex. Imagine developing a god complex because you dropped salt off your arm. And if the other allegations are true, like seizing workers' passports so they couldn't leave the country, well, it's not hard to see why they would give him that label. When 5 of his grill men couldn't bear his ill treatment anymore, they proceeded to take him to court, accusing him of unpaid overtime after they worked over 72-hour weeks while he pocketed a 3% cut of their tips. Now, although 3% may not sound like much, taking any amount of tips is an act that could only be described as unnecessary greed, especially when he doesn't really provide a pleasant work environment. When the case got to court, the judge couldn't see it in any other way and ordered him to compensate them a sum of $230,000. Justice served, right? Well, just after the court ordered him to pay, he would once again show his true colors by firing them suddenly, claiming he wasn't satisfied with their performance. What a funny coincidence. But it wasn't just his staff who had enough. Pretty soon, the customers started asking uncomfortable questions as well. For a while, the outrageous prices at Salt Bae's restaurant were part of the flex. People loved showing off golden steak and $1,000 tabs. But all of that changed the day Salt Bae himself posted a customer's receipt with the smug caption, "Quality never expensive," which is a paradoxical statement that actually implies that no price is too big for quality. That was a big mistake. as what he thought would boost his luxury image blew up in his face. His followers were livid, and they finally started doing the math and asking the right questions. What exactly are we paying for? Is it the gold leaf that you can easily get at a local baking shop for less than $12? Or the beef itself, which is claimed to be a high standard, even though former employees admitted being forced to lie to customers about the meat quality? That's when people realized they were dropping absurd amounts of money for what many consider average food at best. And when people compared the prices drinks were sold at the mall to how much he sold them, it made them even more furious. One Heineken is $55. LMAO. We are not expensive. One Red Bull is 30 pounds. 2 glasses of Coca-Cola are 18. What was once seen as luxury started to feel like a scam. And in no time, the internet that once worshipped him totally turned on him. Mocking comments about his ridiculous prices began flooding in. Ratings were beginning to be poor, and the reviews pulled up calling his food mid and outright terrible. People paid over $1,000 for some guy with sweaty hairy arms to add that extra seasoning to their food, huh? I'm gonna start eating half an ice pop and selling them as half the calories. At one point, his restaurant was even ranked as one of the worst in London. But if you think that was bad, the biggest blow to his reputation was something that happened way back in 2018. And this time, it wasn't about money, it was about people getting hurt. His need for flashy stunts backfired in the most horrifying way possible. A reckless tableside fire show that literally set his customers in flames.
Oh my god! I am the... Oh my god!
4 unsuspecting tourists who visited to have a taste of his signature experience ended up walking out not just disappointed, but scarred for life. The most tragic case was Kristina Tresnakova, a young model who suffered a 3rd-degree burn over 35% of her body. Accidents happen, and that was obviously a very terrible one. All in all, he ended up facing around 8 lawsuits, not just from burnt customers, but also from furious workers who had enough of his mistreatment. Suddenly, Salt Bae wasn't just the guy with the cool salt sprinkle, it was the punchline for inhumanity, and made people wish he were punished. But the ripple effect didn't stop there. In 2020, there was another report of a major altercation with a customer. The customer, Dwayne Miranda, claimed to have had his order changed to something more expensive. From the standard $275 tomahawk steak to the golden option, which would cost $1,000 each. And he wasn't informed about the upcharge until it was time to pay, leaving him with a $5,000 bill. As a result, he refused to pay such an outrageous amount until the restaurant called the cops on him. To avoid further conflict, the customer was forced to pay, but took to social media to repeatedly call out Salt Bae. This had a great impact on Salt Bae's internet image, as even celebrities who once flocked to him for a viral photo with his golden steak quietly backed away. And when you look back at everything we've seen so far, it finally makes sense why he's clung to the spotlight so desperately, even when it meant embarrassing himself. Fast forward to 2025, with lawsuits piled up and the internet's love for Salt Bae turned to ridicule, it became clear that his gimmicks weren't landing. As he wasn't just taking hits online, his restaurants were also bleeding cash. That was when Salt Bae finally started to face reality, and what came next just proved that this was just the beginning of how bad things could really get. In his location in London, staff reportedly had to turn off their heating system during peak hours in order to reduce operational costs. This was such a cheap move from a renowned multi-million-dollar franchise. In a bid to sustain his empire, Salt Bae did something that no one ever saw coming. You see, Salt Bae was a money-hungry opportunist who would seize any chance to make a few extra bucks than he's actually worth. At least, we can confirm that with his ridiculous pricing and stealing of his staff's tips. And that's what made his next move feel even more desperate. He dramatically slashed the prices at most of his restaurants, a complete U-turn from the luxury, sky-high prices that made him famous in the first place. This move was quite ironic from someone who says quality's never expensive, but when your franchise is on the verge of shutting down and you're about to lose all that you've built for years, you would care less about past principles and adopt new ones if that's what it takes to survive. Unfortunately for Salt Bae, his price slashing didn't bring him as many customers as he expected, because let's be real, even after cutting down his prices, his steak was still way out of reach for the average person, and the fate of his restaurants was already nearly decided. One by one, his restaurants that once boasted of months-long waiting lists and even charging over £200 for a reservation, now found it difficult to get filled on a busy Friday night. If you think that's bad, the restaurant empire he memed so hard to build has has shrunk in the US from 7 locations to 2 in just 2 years, and the situation isn't getting better internationally. But the saddest part for Nusret is that he isn't just losing money, he's losing himself. When you think about it, he started out as a humble butcher who genuinely loved his craft. But once the internet turned him into a meme, he got a taste of that attention that he wasn't willing to let go of, and so he kept chasing relevance. Now, he isn't seen as a world-class chef, nor is he respected for his recipes. He's just that cringy guy who sprinkles salt. Salt Bae is living proof that going viral can be a blessing and a curse, especially when your whole brand depends on being a meme.